people who connected. So I think that's pretty good.
Okay, good. So thank you all for taking your Wednesday evening to join us. I know this is difficult and very hard to sit and have to taste through 4 really delicious wines. So thanks for taking the time, and also thank you for supporting the club. I know see a lot of people that come out and have lunch and dinner with us, and we certainly appreciate that. It's nice to see everybody. Tonight we're going to do 4 Pinot Noirs, and the way that I picked the wines was I wanted to be able to show both the beauty of the grape of Pinot Noir and its flavor profile that you'll find through all the wines, and then also talk and taste how a really extraordinary job that Pinot Noir does of expressing terroir, that it can taste really very different depending upon where you get it from, and really expressive of those particular places while still holding true to its fundamental flavor profile that is the grape. So I'll start with the grape itself. It's a rather finicky grape. It's hard to grow, which is one reason why it's one of the more expensive varietal wines on the market, unlike Chardonnay or Cabernet that are much more durable. Pinot Noir has a much thinner skin, so it does not do really well in a lot of direct heat or direct sun. It likes the cooler climates, particularly the fog, and a little bit lower temperature. But it does have to have enough heat to get it ripe. And it's really very finicky, and if it's underripe, it can taste really very green and very tart. If it gets overripe, it can easily get blown out and just tastes like very ripe fruit. It's finding that sweet spot, so not every place is a great place to grow it. The flavors that I think you'll find in almost all Pinot Noirs is like most red wines, you'll find cherry, usually red cherry. From a warmer climate, you'll see some black cherry, but you also see strawberry, raspberry, and then some more interesting flavors. I find that violets, the flower violets, is something that's very commonly found in Pinot Noir, as well as green tea, even sassafras or cola, and it does a really great job of expressing the earthiness. Truffle, mushroom, forest floor will start to come out as the wine starts to age. It also does really very well with a little bit of oak, not too much oak, but a little bit of oak where, you know, that little bit of vanilla, that spice, that cinnamon and clove spice, and the oak and the toast and the smoke can be a wonderful complement to it. One of the other flavors that I think that we find that's not uncommon to Pinot Noir, especially in wines from cooler climates, and in particular, if you go back and are tasting older Burgundies, I think that they've changed some of the way that they're producing the wines now. You don't see this as much, but you can get kind of a farmyard or a horsiness, a horse smell and flavor to the wines, which for some of us, we really like that, as long as it's kept within reason. That horse smell. I think I may have mentioned this in one of the other tastings we did, but I had a master somm mention that the horsiness that you get in some wines isn't necessarily a bad thing. It depends on how far away from the horse you are and what end of the horse you're closest to. Can say whether it's a good or a bad flavor. The grape itself has been around since, it's been about 2,000 years that we've been growing the grape Pinot Noir, which is pretty amazing. It's certainly not the oldest varietal that we've been growing, but one of the, and it's a shapeshifter. It changes quite readily. So over the years, that the grape is mutated to giving us not only Pinot Noir, but Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris, Pinot Meunier are all, they're all mutations of Pinot Noir. But we have record of Pinot Noir going back to, it's about 150 AD where there's the first writings about the Pinot Noir grape. And remember that for all of these wine grapes, if you take a Pinot Noir grape and put it in the ground and grow a new vine, you're not going to get Pinot Noir. You're going to get something brand new, something completely different. A lot of fruit seeds are like that. So the only way to get Pinot Noir is to clone the vine. So if you really think about it, all the Pinot Noir that we have in the world today all originated from one single plant about 2,000 years ago, which is, to me, it's mind-blowing that we were able to hold on to it this long, and that we were able to propagate that one plant for so long that we still have it today.
Yeah, got enough.
There's about 1,000 different clones of Pinot Noir worldwide.
Don't worry about it.
Which is a lot, especially if you compare it to a grape like Cabernet Sauvignon, where there's about 10 or 12 known clones of Cabernet Sauvignon. So that just gives you an idea of how much the grape really does change over time. I'm going to share my screen here real quick with you. So the first stop for us for the tasting is in Burgundy. And if you look here on the map, see if I can get my mouse over here. So it's this kind of purple area here is Burgundy, and where all these Pinot Noir wines come from. If you look a little bit, zoom in a little bit on it, you see that you have the Côte d'Or here, which is the Côte de Beaune and the Côte de Nuit, where we see a lot of our red wines come from. And the Côte de Chalonnais just south of it is also heavily planted with Pinot Noir. You get farther down into the Mâconnais, that lighter yellow, and there is some Pinot Noir down here, but this is mostly Chardonnay territory. And the reds that are planted are quite often Gamay as opposed to Pinot Noir. The Beaujolais down here, oddly enough, is technically part of Burgundy, even though from a wine consumer standpoint, Beaujolais is a very different area. It's still part of the Burgundy department. Well, we won't talk about that. We'll save that for another tasting.
I'm not showing up on that one.
Way up north, about an hour drive from this northern part of the Côte d'Or is the region of Chablis, which is a white wine producing area, all Chardonnay. So most of the reds that you're going to get are going to be from the Côte de Nuit, Côte de Beaune, and then this Côte de Chalonnais. So let's look at this first wine. So this is Joseph Drouhin's La Forêt. La Forêt translates into the forest. And this is a wine that has the most general appellation available for Burgundy wines. If you look on the label, it just says Bourgogne. And what that means is that all the grapes came from Burgundy, but they could come from anywhere within Burgundy as opposed to one particular place. I do know that the majority of these grapes are coming from the Chalonnais, and also from the Haute Côte de Beaune and the Haute Côte de Nuit, which is the area on the tops of the hills of those two côtes where there's a lot of forest, hence the name La Forêt. So again, this is the most general region that you can get, wide variety of areas, but still is 100% Pinot Noir. So if you want to look at this, the best way to look for the color of the wine, again, is to hold the glass at about a 45-degree angle and look straight down through it at a white piece of paper. And I'm seeing this as a really nice, clear, medium, a little bit on the medium minus side of a ruby color with a little bit of purple in there. You see some blue up on the rim, but a nice ruby color. And then on the nose, this to me is a really classic red Burgundy nose. So you get a fair amount of fruit. There's a lot of tart, red fruit in there, strawberry, raspberry. I get some cranberry, some red cherry. But then there's also a little bit of an herbaceousness. There's a little bit of spice, touch of cinnamon, a little bit of smoke. And then you get that earthiness in there. And I do get a little bit in a really good way, a little bit of that farmyard or that horsiness in there, a little bit of that je ne sais quoi that gives the wine a little bit more depth. And it does have a nice little floral component too, a little bit of violets on there.
Yeah, yeah.
I will say that that I think for me anyway, the real beauty of Pinot Noirs is the aromatics. I think it's a very expressive grape on the nose, and often will translate onto the palate. But I think that the real attraction of Pinot Noir, for me anyway, is certainly on the nose, which is a good reason to put it in a nice Burgundy glass that's really going to accentuate all of those aromas. So let's give it a taste. Nice, very well balanced. If I'm looking at the flavor intensity here, medium intensity, medium acid, maybe a little bit medium plus on the acid, medium tannins. They taste a touch green, not quite underripe, but there's a little bit of added astringency from the greenness of the tannins, but very quite smooth. Medium alcohol, medium plus finish, maybe a 7-8 second finish. And I think this is of good quality, especially for the price. This comes in, the retail price on this is $19. So maybe not an every night wine, but a really nice, easy drinking wine that will go well with the variety of foods. Really very simple fare, from grilled chicken. This would even go well with a barbecued salmon, pasta dishes with pesto, some stronger pasta dishes, lasagna. Pizza is always really great with a wine like this. Nice, attractive nose, pretty straightforward, good quality. This is, to me, this is basic red Burgundy. And again, at a really very attractive price. Good stuff. What else can I tell you about it? About half of it was in stainless steel for 7 to 8 months, and the other half was in probably 2 or even 3-year-old oak barrels for about the same period of time. So you get a little bit of a very small touch of oak on this, but you get some of the benefits of being in the barrel, some of the cohesion with the flavors, a little bit more complexity, a little bit more body on there, coming from that barrel aging. Let's see. Boom. So before we move into the next wine, I'll give you a little bit more history about Burgundy. So Burgundy, for gosh, probably 600-700 years, the majority of the land was owned by the Cistercians and the Benedictine monks. And having a lot of extra time on their hands, they were able to devote a lot of energy into the production of wine and the record keeping of the wines that they made. And also, being some of the few people who were literate, they were able to write this all down. And so going back to the 1100s, 1200s, all the way through maybe about the 1500s, they were organizing and cataloging and demarcating different regions within Burgundy based on the quality and the style of wine produced. And what that's done for us now is we go in and look at Burgundy, in particular the Côte d'Or, and there are hundreds and hundreds of very small vineyards there, all named places that all give a very unique profile to the wines produced from that land. And it's quite remarkable when you go and visit the area and you see really how very small some of these areas are, and then taste the wines, and then the wine just on the other side of the road will taste quite different, have a different profile. And they were the ones that took the time to write this all down and figure it all out. And we're the beneficiaries of that and have all of those different wonderful vineyards. Whenever you see the word clos, C-L-O-S, on any of the labels, clos means wall. So that means that vineyard is a walled vineyard. And in many cases, these walled vineyards are hundreds and hundreds of years old and haven't changed. Clos de Vougeot, for example, Clos de Bez would be another example of a walled vineyard. Something that's really unique, you don't find this in a lot of other areas. Another thing that makes Burgundy quite complicated is not only the huge number of vineyards, but also what happened back at the early 1800s. Napoleon implemented what's called the Napoleonic Code. And part of that code was the laws about inheritance. And the law stated that your land had to be equally divided amongst all your male heirs. So what happened was, so say I had a 100-acre piece of vineyard, and then I die, my 4 sons each get 25 acres. And then the next generation down, maybe my grandkids are all getting 12.5 acres each. And then the next generation down is getting 6 acres and so on. And now we're down to the point, however, 200 years later, where we have vineyards that the ownership is so fractured that you have family members that own 4 vines in a vineyard, not even an entire row, but they own 4 vines. And what this does is it makes it very difficult for any of the vineyard owners to actually be producers because they just don't own enough vines to make any wine. That's why we see so many negociants or these bigger companies like Louis Latour, Joseph Duran in many cases, Louis Jadot, who are purchasing wine and purchasing grapes from all these different owners to make these wines. And then you have multiple producers making grapes from the same vineyard. So for example, you'll see a wine that's from the Clos de Bez vineyard, but it's made by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different producers, which just complicates everything, right? So for example, if you looked at Bordeaux, which is much easier structure, you have a winery like, say, Chateau Margaux, and I think they're up to producing, I think they're up to 4 wines that they produce every year, 4 entire wines. For a long time, they just produced 1. Compare that to Louis Latour, who every year is producing over 300 different wines, and they're either made from Chardonnay or made from Pinot Noir, because they're going by all these small little vineyards. It's quite confusing, but also a lot of fun to really get into and research and find the wines that you particularly like. So let me share my screen here. So this gives you a breakdown of how the wines are produced. So the first wine that we had, the La Forêt, that's basic Bourgogne. That falls at the very bottom of that pyramid. That's the regional wine. So that's about 55% of all the production comes from that. The next wine that we're going to try from Vosne Romanée is a village level or a commune level wine. So that means all the grapes are coming from one small town. So considerably smaller area. And that makes up 34%. And then we have wines that are the Premier Crus. These are particular vineyards that have been designated or have been acknowledged as being superior to the vineyards around them. They make up a total of 10%. And then the ones that we all want, the ones that all the names that we know, the Grand Crus, they make up less than 2% of all the wines coming out of Burgundy. This is the Chambertons, your Montrachets for the Chardonnay, Clos de Bez, La Tâche, for example. So it's a very small level of production that's happening for all of these wines, especially as you get up into the higher quality, which accounts for that higher price. So the next wine that we're going to try, I found this relief map that I thought was really cool. This shows the whole of the Côte d'Or, and it shows how all the vineyards are all along the east-facing slope of this massif piece of land. So it all slopes down and it's all facing east-southeast, which is great for getting the maximum amount of sun. great to be on the slope for the drainage. And there's this wonderful line of limestone and marl that runs this whole length that is what really helps make this area so very famous. And the wine that we're going to try right now comes from this little commune right here of Vosne Romanée, which is home to one of the very few vineyards that are owned completely by one person or one company. They're monopoles, and that's the Domaine de la Romanée Conti, which if anybody has it, please break it out and share it with all of us. It's a great wine, certainly not the least expensive wine, but they do own all the properties for those vineyards, La Tâche and La Romanée, for example. So this one is not a La Tâche wine, but it is from that same commune and actually comes from vineyards that are very, very close to the DRC wines. Really quite special. And then I'll show you this and then we'll taste the wine. This is a drawing, if you looked at this slope, so here again, the slope here, you look at the slope here, this really helps explain where we have the basic level wines are generally coming from down here on the flatland. As you start to climb up the hill, you get into the village level, the commune level, which we'll be tasting now. And if you go a little bit farther up the hill, this line here is where you'll generally see the Premier Cru wines as they gain some elevation. And then about a third of the way to half the way up the hill is the sweet spot where a lot of the Grand Crus are grown. And this is because of a combination of being on the hill, the vines have great drainage in the soil, and also that's just where that happens, that limestone strip comes right down that coat right there. And then you get up towards the top of the hill and it's still really good. We're back into the Premier Crus. And then you get up into this forest, and back behind here is where they were growing the grapes for this first wine that we tried. The La Forêt is more of a commune or a regional level wine. So I think this is a good way to show just how you find that consistency with some of the higher quality vineyards. It's where they're located on the slope. So let's try the Vosne Romanée. So this is wine number 2. So this is from the same producer, same winemaker. Veronique Drouin has been making wine for her family now for, I think, 25 years. So she's made both these 2 wines, and actually 3 of the 4 wines we're trying tonight are her wines, which I think really helps showcase the Pinot Noir grape and the difference in the terroir. So if you look at the color on this one is 2 years older. This is a 2016 as compared to an 18. So we're seeing a little bit more red in this, not as much blue, but still that medium at best color, right? Like I said, Pinot Noir is not a thick-skinned grape, so it's not going to throw a lot of color anyway. So certainly wouldn't call it pale, but it's not like a Merlot or a Cabernet. And then on the nose, really beautiful nose, really beautiful floral on here. You get that violet and the rose that's there. Really beautiful of the sweet oak, the vanilla. The fruit to me smells riper. We still have a lot of red fruit, but there's the red cherry, that ripe strawberry, that raspberry is there, but maybe also a little bit of black cherry in there as well. Some olive. And then you also get that earthiness, a little bit of truffle, that forest floor, touch of leather in there. And then those spices are more dominant. So that cinnamon, that clove, that nutmeg spice, actual smell of oak, the vanilla, toast, a little bit of smoke, all this coming from the oak, which is more prevalent in this wine than in the last wine. This one has 14 to 18 months of French oak, 20% of which is new. So 20% new oak, the rest of it second or even third fill barrels, and a little more than a year, maybe a year and a half of oak aging. So we're getting more oak on this, but not so much that that's the dominant flavor, but it marries in quite nicely. I'm also getting like a camphor or a little bit of like almost like a menthol flavor in here. So give it a taste. riper fruit, a little bit fuller body, right? But still medium acid, medium tannin, medium body, medium alcohol, medium intensity, but much more complex on the palate, right? Nice crisp acidity there, very soft tannins. You notice that tannins are riper on this wine than on the first wine. They're not as edgy or maybe rustic would be another way to describe them. This truly elegant wine. This one is a baby, whereas the first wine you probably want to drink it up in the next couple of years. This wine, arguably, you really want to lay it down for another 6-7 years before you really get into it. And a wine like this could go for 20-25 years before you would start to be concerned about having it go too far. And as it ages, that earthiness, that mushroom, that forest floor, the wet leaves, that savoriness is just going to come out more and more and more. And there is so much fruit here that even as the fruit dries, it'll still stay really well balanced. So really, really beautiful wine, really elegant wine. It's not like some wines which are like powerful in an aggressive way. This is powerful in a really subtle, more elegant way. You know, it's easy to make comparisons to Cabernet Sauvignon, which is such a big wine. This is a much softer wine, much more mellow, but still carries a lot of energy and a lot of power to it, but in a much different way. That's a great wine. That's a great wine. Ben, let me see here. So now we're going to move over to Oregon. So this is a relief map of the state of Oregon. Portland sits right about here. Salem, Oregon is right, it's probably right about here. And the wine that we're tasting is right here in the middle of Willamette Valley and Dundee Hills. This whole area here is what we consider the Willamette Valley. And what makes it such a great growing region is we've got, you know, the Pacific Ocean right here. So that brings in a nice cooling effect. But we've got this range of hills which keeps out the harshest of the weather. So Willamette Valley is not getting those stronger winds or the colder temperatures. It's much more protected in here, but it does get rain and it does get some coolness. And then along here, the border, so the border with Washington, you've got the Columbia River, which comes in off the Pacific, and with it brings that coastal fog. So very similar to what we see here in the Bay Area. And if you think about San Pablo Bay, you know, a little bit farther inland, and you get up into Carneros, how that fog comes up, that's very similar to what can happen here in Willamette Valley. And then Dundee Hills is a hill that sits, so you've got that nice drainage with the slope, and also most of the vines are going to be facing that same direction that we saw in the Côte d'Or, that east-southeast facing slope, so it's getting a lot of the sun. This is, they've been making, Domaine Drouin has been making wine in Oregon since, I believe, 1985. So a number of years now. They're very well established, but they're certainly not the only producers from Burgundy that have come over and set up shop here. One of the big reasons is, well, one, the property in Burgundy is so expensive that it's almost impossible to expand or make a new winery there. So you have to look outside of Burgundy if you want to grow. But what makes, in particular, Willamette Valley so popular is it's on the same latitude as Burgundy. So about that 43rd, 44th parallel. And we're seeing very similar climates. So that cooler climate, the sun comes in at the same angle, the same length of days. So they saw a similar area, know that Pinot Noir does well for them there, so that it must do well in Oregon, and it certainly does. It's doing a great job, and I think that Oregon really shows a nice kind of a balance between the more powerful, riper California Pinot Noirs that we'll try here in a minute, and the more elegant kind of finesse-driven Pinots from Burgundy. So the third wine, so this is Domaine Drouin, and like I said, this is the same winemaker. So this is Veronique Drouin making the wine here, and this is all from their estate vineyards on Dundee's Hills, which is a lot of red clay, a lot of volcanic soils there, so very well draining loam, and they've got great sun exposure and a nice long growing season. With the way that the daylight is, it's going to not get dark up there until 9:30, even close to 10 o'clock at the peak of the summer season. So give this one a smell, and already you can smell it's richer, it's riper, it's more robust. It just smells like a bigger wine. The color on it, if you look at the color, it's that same medium ruby, but there is a little bit more extraction here. It seems to be a little bit of a darker color wine, although the sun's going down here, so maybe it's just the lack of sun, but it seems to be a little bit of a darker colored wine. And then on the nose, I'm getting darker fruit, so I'm getting more black cherry, maybe even a little bit of blackberry, some plum in there, which I wasn't getting in the first two wines, but still getting that red cherry, some of that raspberry. Not as much earth. It seems to be more fruit driven than the balance with that earthiness, but does have some oak in here, but it's not as obvious, but I'm getting a little bit of that spice. And that floral, maybe a little bit of more of a rose than a violet on this wine. So give it a taste. Bigger, right? Fuller bodied, more fruit forward. So it still has, I'm still going to put this in the medium category, medium acid, medium tannin, medium body, medium alcohol. This has a long finish to it, but it just seems, everything seems to be pumped up a little bit. Riper fruit, fuller bodied. The ripeness of the fruit, it gives the perception of a slightly sweeter wine, even though I don't believe there's any more residual sugar in this than the previous wines, but just the ripeness of the fruit can give the impression of some sweetness there. And I'm not getting as much of the earthiness, that forest floor, the earth, the truffle, not as much. I think in time it'll start to come out, but this seems to be really, it's kind of showing itself more on the fruit than on the other components. And the oak, which is there, is also taking a little bit more of a back seat in this case and really letting the fruit shine. But again, it's a very elegant wine, very well balanced, and is certainly not overly powerful. I think with this wine, you could step up and have more grilled meats, grilled chicken, pork certainly would go really well with this. And again, I think this is a great choice for a wine if you're sitting down, when you come in for dinner at the club and there's 4 of you sitting and getting different entrees. A wine like this is a great choice to share because it would go well with the grilled salmon and also could arguably go well with the steak. It's big enough for that. So for people having different entrees but sharing one bottle, this is a great choice for that. Great with cheese. I would put it with cheddars and some of the cheeses that have a little bit higher protein, a little bit lower acidity to them, but would show well with that in salumi and antipasto and all the rest of that as well. But a really nice wine. I think, to stop and look at these 3 wines, knowing that they're all from the same winemaker, you can really see where there's the common thread of these wines of the elegance and the softness and the red fruit and that balance with the earth and that really judicious use of oak. But then you see it really change as it gets from a larger area, maybe the cooler areas, to a little bit warmer and more site-specific, where it gets much more complex, and then to a significantly warmer climate where we're getting fuller bodied and more fruit forward in the wine. But three really great examples of what Pinot Noir can do. Great stuff. So now for our fourth wine, let me go back to this here. So we're going to taste the wine from Russian River. So I think we're all familiar with here, Russian River. But then I found this map, which I think is really cool. So it kind of shows at an angle. You know, here's Rohnert Park here, Santa Rosa, Windsor, get up to Healdsburg. Out here is Sevastopol, Grayton. I don't know if you can see the casino in there. Maybe this map's too old for that. But this whole area here is Russian River, and you could see why it does what it does when you see that the hills are fairly low here. You have Russian River up to the north, but that cool coastal fog and that cool temperatures are able to just really easily just roll right into Russian River and then sit. And then as it heats up, it rolls back out for the hottest part of the day. And then in the evening, it'll roll back in. You know, they talk about the Petaluma Gap doing the same thing. That's a little bit farther south from here. But you really get a good idea looking at this of what makes Russian River so special, knowing it does have a variety of soils. It doesn't have a lot of that slope, the hills, although there are lots of smaller hills in here that different producers will take advantage of. But it really is a special area, mainly because of the fog and the ocean really mitigating the higher temperatures. I mean, if you just roll right over the Mayacamas Mountains here, and you're in, St. Helena, significantly hotter, right? Significantly hotter. Even going up into Alexander Valley here, significantly hotter once you get out of Russian River. So this is a special place and is an obvious home for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I also think some Syrah could grow really well up there too, but that's for a different seminar. So the last wine that we have, this is Paul Hobbs. We all know Paul Hobbs does a great job. Variety of wines from different levels. This is their Russian River, one of their kind of more go-to high quality wines. I would argue that this is one of the wines that put them on the map. The winery itself is in Grayton, just outside of Grayton, but I do know that they use, I think it's 6 or 7 different vineyards from around Russian River. So certainly not as broad of an area as when we were talking about the first wine with the Bourgogne, but also not as specific as the second or third wines from the Vosne Romanée or the Dundee Hills wine. So a little bit broader area encompassing more of the nuances that would come out of Russian River. But if you look at the color on this one does seem a little bit darker. It's that nice ruby color. This is a 2017. The last two were 2016, so this is a little bit younger, but certainly has a little bit more color to it, but still is nice and clear. That ruby color, medium ruby. And then on the nose, darker fruit, a little bit darker fruit here. So I get that raspberry, but I'm also getting blackberry. I'm getting some plum. I'm getting that black cherry. I'm getting the earthiness, a little bit of that mushroom, some of that forest floor. That spiciness from the oak is coming through. Some of the vanilla. And also, if you really smell in here, this isn't the most pronounced that I've smelled from Russian River Pinots, but it's something I always look for that I do think is here, is cola nut. If you look for like sassafras or cola, you find that a lot in Russian River Pinots as kind of a hallmark for these wines. I get it when I tasted it earlier. I got it more on the palate than I did on the nose, but it is there in a little bit. And maybe even a little bit of white pepper. So give it a taste. Beautiful wine. Different, right? Really ripe, lively fruit, darker fruit though, but still medium in body, acid, tannin, long length here, really well integrated oak. The oak on this one, wrote it down. So this is 10 months in French oak, but almost half of it is new. So less time than the previous two wines, but more new oak. So twice as much new oak, but maybe 2/3 of the amount of time in the barrel. So you're picking up more of that new oak flavor, but not getting as much of that spice character that's coming out that was in the second and third wines. But you get the oak, you get that toast. The vanilla is a little bit more pronounced here. Along with the floral is certainly there. The violets, maybe even a little bit of the rose. This one also has a little bit more of a smoky character that I didn't get in the other wines as well. So showing the richness that comes from Russian River, where you got some more body, you've got that really ripe fruit. This is a bigger, stronger wine, but still really very elegant, very smooth, and you can still see that thread of what makes Pinot Noir run through this. If you still have some, hopefully you have some, go back to the first wine and give that a taste. You see how different that is? Like when we started going through the tastings, this wine, the first wine, had a nice richness to it. Once you get up to the Paul Hobbs, and certainly after the Paul Hobbs and the Dundee Hills, it makes the La Forêt taste like a much lighter body, higher acid wine, right? I could feel it up on the teeth, the acidity coming in, and a little bit more of that greener tannin coming in. So it's interesting to go back, because as you progress through these wines, it can be hard to really tell the difference, because you're slowly building up. And you go back and you taste that first one, and you can really see what a big difference it is. How these wines are all from the same grape, but just coming from different regions can make them so different. Then if I go back to the Vosne Romanée, then that one again just seems so different than the other three. A little bit more of that menthol and that spice comes out, and really that real wonderful integration of the earthiness is there. So great wines. I hope you enjoyed all these wines. Anybody have any questions or any comments about these?
No, Michael, I think this was a great demonstration of the versatility of Pinot, because depending upon whether you're old world or new world, people have very different ideas of what the grape is capable of. But I think, you know, you walked us perfectly through kind of the elegance of the old world to the new world fruit and these different styles. And it's really nice. And it was interesting, you know, on the Drouhin wines, to take the same winemaker, to take Laurent and look at her wines, both, you know, from Burgundy and from Oregon, and you actually see the impact of the place, because that's what she's about. She's, you know, she's very married and wedded to the old world style of winemaking.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the real, I think, expression of the place, which is interesting to see. And you know, then we ended in California, where certainly, I mean, a lot more oak in the wine,
Mm-hmm.
a lot hotter temperature. And I don't know what the alcohol content was, but I thought, you know,
Warm up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And
But not as, not as much as I thought. So the range on the alcohols on these was the La Forêt came in at 13.5, and then the Oregon and the Russian River came in at 14.1.
okay,
So of course there's, they don't have to be exact on the label, but assuming that they're being accurate, that's really just about 0.5%, which is noticeable, but not too dramatic.
yeah.
You
I
know,
think it was California wine. Once you have so much extraction, then the oak, you can tolerate a lot more oak, but there was so much more oak in that than in either of the Burgundies.
but it keeps, but not out of balance.
Not out of balance,
Right.
correct?
So it's just a different way of doing it. One thing I was going to mention earlier about Burgundies, and this was something that was also told to me years ago, was, never tell a Burgundy producer that you like his Pinot Noir, because they're not making Pinot Noir, they're making Burgundy.
Right.
And they look at the grape. The reason why they use Pinot Noir is because it's the best vehicle to express the terroir.
Yeah.
That's not about the grape.
Well,
It's about the land.
To your point, the Burgundies, they can't irrigate. There's no watering. It's
Right.
what the sky provides. And there's no way you could produce a wine, like the Hobbs, like the Paul Hobbs in Burgundy, because you need water to do this.
Right. And you need
water
more heat. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see those stylistic differences too, where in Oregon and California you can water the vines,
I know.
but in Burgundy you can't.
Mm-hmm. True.
Hey, Michael, I have a question for everybody who did the tasting. I like to follow the KISS rule. You get to pick one bottle, give them the price point and what you liked. Which bottle are you going with? I know which one I'm picking.
We didn't get a price break for the last two.
Oh, so they got a little bit expensive. So the La Forêt retails, I got all of these. I looked up the price on wine.com just to try and be consistent. So the La Forêt came in at 19. The Vosne Romanée comes in at 85. The Dundee Hills from Oregon is 40. And the Paul Hobbs comes in at 70.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I vote for the Dundee Hills. I have had it before. Well, Justin, you're just going because it's the most expensive.
I go with Justin.
Yeah.
I go with the Romany.
I mean, another way to look at, and this is
and I know it needs time, but I think that ultimately, if we got together 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now, this one would actually show the best.
So another way that I look for a wine, it's not just how it shows itself immediately, but if you're patient enough and you have a big enough glass, patience is really the key. You pour yourself a nice 4 or 5 ounce pour, and then really do your best to let that wine last for maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour if you can pull it off, and keep going back to it. And on a wine like the Vosne Romanée, you'll find something new will come out every time you go back to that wine.
I like the wine. Don't get me wrong. I just think it's expensive for what it is. That's all.
So my opinion on French Burgundies versus Pinot Noirs in general, and I love them both, is I really find that the French Burgundies tend to go better with food. I mean, they are matched so well to different types of food, whereas I find like the Paul Hobbs is really easy to drink by itself, whereas I think the Vosne
And that's because of the acidity. So if you look at the acid in the wine, so I know acid and tannin can be easily confused when you're tasting the wine, but the acidity is what's making your mouth water, that puckeriness that makes your mouth water. The acidity is much more present, higher acidity in the Burgundy wines than in the Oregon and California wines. And a lot of that has to do, well, almost all of that has to do with the climate there. Cooler climate produces higher acid wines. Higher acid wines go better with food. because that acidity is what helps cut the fat
Fat.
that's present in the food. So
That's why I think I like, I'm kind of prejudiced to the
mhm.
Voni because I know after we finish this, we're going to sit down and we're probably going to drink this bottle at dinner tonight.
There you go. It's like
No,
Italian wines. Italian wines, I mean, how many times would you pick an Italian wine to have with the meal versus going to a cocktail party and saying, oh yeah, for the cocktail, yeah, I'll have a glass of Barolo, right? You don't do that. You go, those are generally food wines, right? They're not really cocktail wines. Whereas our wines, the way that we make them here in California, in the US, is very much as a cocktail wine. And
Right.
if you look at it historically, we started really drinking wine. We stepped up from, Lancers and Matus and some of those other wonderful wines and getting into the varietal wines when we started being told that having 3 martinis before dinner may not be a great idea. So we were, for our culture, drinking wine was in a way replacing cocktail hour. So we produced wines that were meant for cocktail hour. And so you look at the easy example is look at how we make our Chardonnay, right? Like the classic, and it's changing now, but the classic California Chardonnay, is it more of a food wine or is it more of a cocktail wine? It's cocktail wine.
Cocktail.
And I think and you put our climate in there and it makes it really easy for us to do that, but it's how we drink wine, at least traditionally in the last 50 years is more of a cocktail than with food. I mean, one of my favorite sayings in Italy is when you've had too much to drink, you're a little drunk, they don't tell you that you had too much to drink, they tell you you didn't eat enough.
Michael, Bruce Smith here. A question. First of all, whoever commented about Ripple, kindred spirit. There are not too many people that go back far enough to know. Good for you.
Valid point.
It's one of the great classics of my generation. And for all the wrong reasons. And it was the most pleasurable for all the right reasons. In any
We're not
event,
gonna remember those days.
yeah. But at age 77, I'm not really big into laying a wine down. I like the more immediate. And you refer to the first one as the baby, 5, 6, 7 years, and then we came back to that subject when you talked about the tannin and the acid in the teeth. And I would like you to rank these on what level, how long they should be laid down theoretically, and what really goes into tannins, obviously, but goes into, having to lay a wine down for an awful lot of years.
So I think that first off, I think it's a misnomer that most wines need to be laid down. I would say 90% of wines produced, maybe even 95% of wines produced, are meant to be consumed right when you buy them. When you're looking at all the wine produced. Now, when we're talking about the Grand Crus, the first growth wines, then there's an argument to be made to lay those down. 30, 40 years ago, the way we made wines, and also because the climate was cooler in general, a lot of wines like Cabernet-based wines, Merlot-based wines really needed that time. A Bordeaux from 25, 30 years ago, it really needed that time to mellow out. It was pretty rough. Now, the majority of the wines, Bordeaux included, are being produced in a way, and the climate's warmer, where those wines are ready to go right when they're released. So I think it's not so much that there are a lot of wines that need to be laid down. I think that in this case, we're looking at these 4 wines. The Vosne Romanée is the one, to me, that would be the most exciting to watch develop. But that doesn't mean that it's not delicious right now. I think this is it's a fantastic wine. Very few wines, if you open them too early, would be considered infanticide. Most of them are going to be pleasurable at any point. It really comes down to what you like. If you like the riper fruit, more not even fruit forward, but just riper fruit as opposed to drier fruit, fresher flowers versus dried flowers, then drinking younger wines is the way to go. If you like that forest floor and the truffle and the mushroom and the dried flowers and the dried fruit, then it's worth hunting around for wines with a little bit of age on them. But I think all of these wines are showing really well right now. The only wine that I wouldn't recommend holding on to for any length of time is the first one. That one's obviously meant to be consumed right away. The other three wines I think are delicious right now and will continue to gain complexity and change in a positive way over a good period of time. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
I don't think I'm gonna be building a wine cellar for my grandchildren.
Yeah. No, drink it.
That's right.
Well, Michael, I'm partial to Santa Barbara Pinot Noirs. How would you contrast the Paul Hobbs with this, what you get in Central Coast?
So the Central Coast going down, I think there's huge variety of climates in there. It does cool down, especially when you get down to Santa Barbara, where you get the valleys that run east-west that really pull in that cooler air. So Santa Barbara even though it's much farther south, is a cooler climate. I think you're going to find the wines in general to be not quite as, the fruit probably won't be as dark, and probably not as fruit forward, maybe something in between the Russian River and the Oregon wine, if that makes sense. And again, as I mentioned, that cola nut, or like sassafras, or even kind of a root beer quality, cherry cola is something that I find particularly in Russian River that I haven't seen coming from Santa Barbara or down the Central Coast.
That would include Paso Robles.
Paso Robles Pinot, those are wonderful wines. If you make sure you're getting them from the west side of the highway there, where it's cooler. Definitely. Yeah, I think the area when I was considering showing a wine from this region, I think in California, the hottest up and coming area for Pinot Noir is Santa Lucia Highlands. I think does a phenomenal job, and it's such a killer spot. And there already are some, Pizzoni. There's a lot of there's some great vineyards there, and just how that's situated, a lot of potential. So if I was looking for a place to look for some really excitement, that all up and down the coast, there's a ton, but that's one that to me stands out as being.
Michael, Debbie and I have to leave. I want to thank you. What a special evening, and I hope it's many more to come. I notice you're recording this. Is there any way we can go back online as a member and log in and get?
Yeah, so what we've done with these is we're gonna have the link available. We put them on YouTube, but you have to get the link through the website. So if you'll be able to if you go to the calendar, the event calendar, and look up today, it'll take us a couple of days because thankfully Meredith edits it down for you. But that'll be available for you to review at any time.
It would be helpful if when you put it on YouTube and the recording that you maybe go through each label and say exactly what they are, so that I want to go back in, or I might want to have my children, look at it on YouTube, that they would know exactly what to go to buy the wine.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Michael,
I was wondering if you could just briefly comment on the Terroir of Oregon versus Burgundy. You said that they were at the same latitude, but the Oregon is generally richer. Why is that? What is the difference?
So it's a little bit warmer. When we talk about climates, there's generally three types of really broad climates we talk about. We talk about a maritime climate, which is like Bordeaux, which is going to have a lot of cloud cover, not a lot of difference between winter and summer temperatures. Season. Then we have a maritime climate, or I'm sorry, a Mediterranean climate, which is what we have here, which is rain comes in the fall or in the winter, and not a lot of temperature change between winter and summer. What they have in Burgundy is what we call a continental climate. So there's not a lot of large bodies of water near it, where there's rain and sometimes hail throughout the season, but there's a significant change in temperature between the winter and the summer. So in Burgundy, they have a little bit of a longer season, but when it gets cold, and they can suffer from hail and frost and more rain, which is one reason why they have such that really extreme up and down with the vintage variation. But in general, it's going to be in Burgundy, it's generally cooler. Although, God, you look the last couple years, it's like Sacramento in the middle of Burgundy. It's hot, unfortunately. But in general, it's a little bit cooler. Also, just by the style that American drinkers like, the American producers are letting the grapes hang on the vine a little bit longer, because that's where we see the acidity goes down and the body goes up because it's producing more sugar. So it's a combination of those two things.
Great, thank you.
So we replayed first sessions with a friend of ours, and it worked out perfectly. Streaming it later, it was just terrific.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that that came through well.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to do a Mad Dog tasting next week.
Yeah, we'll do Mad Dog. We'll do
Excuse me?
Boone's Farm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We got that. Maybe somebody's got a leftover bottle of Lancers.
Yeah, Lance. Those
I remember Lancers.
See, if you're going to do it right, then you have to include Madeira, Port, and Sherry, because those are all the fortified wines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of next week, first of all, I want to thank Michael. Michael, fantastic. You did such a great job.
Great job, Michael.
Have you as our club manager.
Thank you.
We're just so lucky. So if anybody goes down for lunch or dinner at the club and you don't know what to order for wine, ask Michael. He's extremely knowledgeable. But
I'll make you buy a pack of wine.
I'd like to buy another pack of this wine. But I'd really like to put in a plug for next week. We're doing the Ketchum Winery, and they've got 2 great Pinot Noirs they're going to be tasting. They've got a Viognier and a Rosé. And if you go to the website and you go to our calendar and you click on the event, you can order the wine, and I think they're offering a 30% discount to club members. So look at that too.
It's great. Yep, definitely come next week.
Well, this was definitely a bargain buy.
Yeah, it was excellent buy.
So do you have the Ketchum bottles at the club?
I don't. So I think Ketchum, they're going to be, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, but to get those wines, you're getting them directly from the winery.
That's right. And as Kim said, go to the calendar, and it has all the instructions. And because they have to ship the wines, I would recommend you go there tomorrow.
Okay. And by the way, the Paul Hobbs is really opened up, So, and by the way, I thought the Romanée is awesome. It did open up more. Air is always good.
They opened up.
Get your-
Try it with your dinner tonight if you're having a nice,
Mhm.
dinner.
You know, my wife's out of town. I'm not having a nice dinner.
You're having this for dinner.
Well, I ordered some Chinese food. I don't know. Maybe the Hobbs would go best with it.
Chinese
I think that's right. A little spicy
dinner.
food.
About
Yep.
go best.
point.
Chinese food, I'd grab a bottle of Riesling.
Yeah.
Well, I got 4 open bottles here.
Yeah. Well,
So Michael,
We actually read that the deadline for ordering the ketchup was like last week, midweek. Is that not true? Does anybody know?
yeah, just are they able to, will they have time to get the wines for Ketchum?
Yeah, so there's a number listed for Renee, and if it's not there on the website, I'll put it on Facebook later tonight, and just call her. Do you guys all have access to the St. Francis Yacht Club group on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, I'll post Renee's number, her phone number there, and you can just call her. I had problems on the website trying to place my order. I couldn't figure it out, so I just called her. So I'll put the number on Facebook.
I think there was a type. I think there was a typo on the St. Francis website that said that like the deadline for ordering was the 3rd of August, and I think maybe they meant the 13th.
Oh, that makes
Okay,
sense.
thank you.
Yeah.
Both of you. That helps. Good help on that.
so Michael, other than K&L, which first thing I did because we're getting a little late to get your package, is the only thing I found was the first wine, and nothing else was available. Do you have other recommendations for the upper quality wines like this?
Yeah, K&L, I think they do a fantastic job. I mean, one of the problems with Burgundy is, they'll produce, one producer will make 300 different bottles, but they're only going to make like 20 cases of each wine. So to try and find those exact wines is challenging for anybody. K&L does a great job at it. I think their Burgundy selection is really quite good.
Yeah.
Other places, I mean, like
K&L's awesome. I mean, they have amazing deals.
They do. They've got some great wines. I like D&M, which is really good. They've got some great Burgundies, also fantastic champagnes over on, is it Sacramento and Fillmore? Clay and Fillmore for D&M.
JJ Buckley.
Yep, JJ Buckley is
Buckley is
another
good.
great one.
Well, there's a K. I'm down in Palo Alto. There's a K&L.
The K&L there is great. Yeah, that's a great shop. Yeah. Mhm.
But the point more is that these are smaller wineries and they don't have the
They're
distribution.
really hard to find. I mean,
Exactly.
finding Burgundy is tough. It's really tough. You know who has a really good Burgundy collection is Draeger's in Menlo Park.
Really?
They've got some they've got some really good Burgundy collections in there.
Well,
Yeah.
Draeger's, that's like a price you need a platinum American Express to go shopping.
Yes.
That's right. Almost. You're right.
It's funny because they've got the Viognier, that kind of cooking, I don't know if it's a cooking school upstairs.
It's
And
closing. The
No
restaurant.
more. They closed
No
it.
more.
did they close it? But I used to teach wine classes upstairs. And when I
Really?
would teach Burgundy, a lot of what I would teach would be how to read the label, because the labels are so hard to read. And the beauty of teaching there was on the lunch break, I would send the students and I'd go down and just look at all the labels. And so they would get this crowd of people in, but of course wouldn't sell any of the wines because they're just all the students coming in to look at the labels and figure out how to discern what's in there.
That's a great, no, that really is a great supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Really is.
Yeah. No, it's
Lenardi's down in
Okay.
South
Okay.
Bay
good.
is okay too.
Mhm.
I just had
Good.
this wild thought where, we're always thinking of how to improve our membership. And of course we are a yacht club.
Mhm.
And yet we're finding through our yachting relationships, these incredible wines and such friendly wineries and families. And the only way you really know about them is if you belong to the club,
Mhm.
and we like this inside track. And it's like, one other lure.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a good deal. Good deal.
All right, well, this is great, guys. I'm gonna go get Chinese food.
There you
Great event.
go. Perfect. Well,
With
thank
a
you
ripple.
so much for spending the time all together. This was great fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you,
All right,
Michael.
bye, guys.
Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks,
Okay,
Michael.
we'll see you
Good
soon.
job.
We'll see you at the club for lunch and
Great.
dinner.
All right, take care.
Thank you. We'll see you this weekend.
Thanks,
Hey,
Justin.
David. We get our boats together, David.
Everybody, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for putting it together. Elizabeth Big, we'll see you again soon, maybe. Ciao.
Perfect.